All right, what's going on, everyone? I am back from some shooting, some backpacking, and some all-around New Zealand goodness, and I am stoked for us to have a bit of a chat. I'm also going to be sharing some of my photos from throughout the week, and at the end, I'll break down which one is definitely my favorite. In the meantime, though, here's a little snippet from my favorite outing of the week, so I'll see you guys in a second. All right, let's get this thing started. So I believe that we as photographers and videographers often miss more shots than we can imagine for one simple reason, and that's mobility or the lack thereof. The truth is that moving our feet is always going to be harder than not moving our feet, but it comes with the effect of great consequence. Let me follow that thought a little bit. So the other day, I was out on a backpacking trip that I had planned with the sole purpose of creating images for this project I've started working on. And while wandering along the trail through Arthur's Pass with the quiet echoes of my thoughts for the 10 hours it took me to get to camp, I spent a considerable amount of time pretty fixated on this book that I've been recently reading. One chapter essentially focuses on the idea that the more willing you are to explore angles, to move your feet, to stay fluid, the more likely you are to put yourself in a position to find that next great photo, to find the right composition, ultimately to create more compelling images. The truth is that fluidity and mobility, action even, they're what make photography, at least in my opinion, endlessly more fun. It's exactly the reason I was reading this book. It's called Galen Rowell's Inner Game of Outdoor Photography. I will link to it below because I honestly do think anybody who does photography should read it, and quite frankly, it's becoming a bit like my photography Bible. To briefly summarize the chapter I just alluded to, Galen wrote about one of his most famous photos in which he seems to miraculously capture a rainbow seemingly springing from a Buddhist temple. The intense visual effect, it allows for a range of interpretations and for various emotions to bud in the viewer. He rather frankly states that the only reason he got the photo is because of his willingness to move his feet. At around dinner time, when everybody else did not want to move, didn't want to move their feet, wanted to stick with dinner, he opted to go outside for an image that he believed could exist somewhere else. The best part is that Galen rather frankly states that the only reason he got the photo is because he was willing to stay mobile. He decided that there was the possibility of a photo, and he knew that if he were to move his feet to follow his idea, ultimately he puts himself in a better chance to create that photo. And as we see, it works. Part of why I love this so much is because it's practical, it's physical. It isn't, a zoom lens. It's not some focus stack or an intense level of compositional prowess. Really, it's effort. So I know, I gotta rein this back in a little bit. I'm gonna bring it back to my hike. After too much time alone on the trail, it was a relief to finally get to camp and to move past the thoughts that had been lingering in my mind for so long, really from the start of the day till this point at nearly the very end of the day. So this place that I arrived to, I have no hesitation in saying that it's one of the more beautiful places I've spent the night in the mountains. And I made quick work with my camera. I got out right away. And I began filling my SD card with hundreds, possibly more than 1,000 really bad photographs. The truth is they just weren't good, and I couldn't seem to get a half decent shot. And if you're anything like me, you begin to feel the heated frustration that comes with not being able to connect these really obvious dots right in front of you, Everything's there, it's beautiful, it's mind-numbing, and yet for some reason, I can't take a half-decent photo. This was just absolutely driving me crazy. Now, I won't lie, I sat there frustrated, complaining, looking at my stuff and trying to convince myself that one of these photos was good when I knew all of them weren't. And in that process, I was able to manage to take a few breaths, and I began to process that really what I was doing, it really just wasn't working. So I started to consider what to do different. And I realized that I was only really considering my subject through this very fine set of angles. I was not considering the full range of possible angles. And none of these allowed the subject to actually pop. Then Galen's lessons started to come back to mind. I can't and won't claim to be some kind of clinician with a camera. Where Galen saw the opportunity for a compelling photograph in the distance, I only saw that what I was doing was not compelling. In hopes of finding better results, I shifted to this new tactic. I treated it a little bit like a math equation. If my subject is here, how can I miss a better angle if I simply walk a full 180 degrees, a semicircle around the subject, taking photos every 9 or 10 meters. The best part is that when I finally found this spot where I felt like an image was working, this spot ended up being the place I would spend almost the entire evening. Almost every image I've shown you, at least that's edited or that I'm proud of, nearly every image came from this spot. On a side note, I think it's worth mentioning that our gear implores us to stay mobile. If you're a prime shooter, then you probably are already acutely familiar with this principle. It's the strictness of a single focal length that provides a bit of a barrier and forces you to stay mobile. If you're like me though, and I know that there are many of you that are, you do prefer shooting with zoom lenses, and I believe there are many merits to that, but I'll hold that thought for another video. With a zoom lens, we have to stay aware. We have to remember to move our feet, because sometimes with that zoom, it's easy to become a little lazy. So all this is to say that sometimes we get stuck in the confines of an idea or a vision. We take in a scene, we feel our emotions developing and our perspective gaining a sense of clarity, and then we do our best to interpret this through our photos. Yet, the truth is that our mind can act like an echo chamber for false affirmations. The way the sun feels when you first arrive, the way the wind feels as it's passing by, and the emotions you feel when you take in a scene that's so spectacular and that you've been waiting for so long. These all serve to blind and to bias our artistic eye. Mobility is a means to unshackle from that. It means trusting that what you see, it may not be the full picture. And if you allow yourself the opportunity to waver from those initial ideas, those initial emotions, those biases, and most importantly, if you allow yourself the chance to wander, you take incremental steps towards a more compelling photograph. All right, so before I close this up, I want to show you guys what was my favorite image from the trip. But I'd love to know which one is yours, and more importantly, I'd love to know why you believe one is the best. I don't want to play too hard into the cliche, but it really does work. Use the comments below to let me know. I'll probably say this in every video, but I think it's still worth mentioning. Everything I've said here is just my opinion, and it's based on the set of experiences that I have personally lived. Nothing I say is objective truth or absolute fact. It is just my interpretation based on the time I've spent working at this craft. With that in mind though, if you don't hate this video, if you liked listening, and if you found any value in this, consider checking back sometime, because this is just the first video in my first ever series to compose an image. The best way to make sure you don't miss one of these videos is to subscribe. I know that's a cliche, but that is just kind of how the system works. Okay, so last thought here. You guys may have noticed that the focus of this week's video was a little red hut. Consider this my celebratory reveal that these images are all part of a new series I'm working on focused on the remote red huts of the South Island of New Zealand. I'll be visiting as many of these things as I can, ideally as far out there in the mountains as I can, with the goal to eventually produce a zine or a small book for sale. These huts are honestly a crazy marvel and an absolute lifesaver when you're way the hell out there. More than anything, they are absolutely a testament to the bullheaded nature, as well as the class of the various climbing organizations and other groups involved in the creation of these huts. I'll include links to some of the main pages of a few of these groups below, as well as the Kia Conservation Trust, because honestly, the Kia just deserve absolutely every ounce of attention they can get. And with that, get out there, have fun. I'm excited to see you guys next week.